Welcome to another episode of Siblings Showdown, the Best Ball edition. We are talking best ball strategy today, another strategy show as we will each week. And I'm Meg, of course. You can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS, and I'm joined by my sibling, my brother Steve. You can follow him at SteveOSpeak on Twitter. Steve, how are you doing today? And you ready to talk a little best ball strategy?
Doing good. Absolutely. It's best ball season. I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely officially best ball season. Here now in mid-May, and it's only going to keep ramping up more and more from here. I love it. And so, last week we talked about the schedule was released, and a lot of people focus on week 17. And while we definitely pay attention to week 17 correlation, it's not the only thing you should focus on. And there's various things that we think you can use strategy wise to help gain an edge. And we talked last week about just stacking up the top offenses and how to do so. I actually have an article that I'm putting out this week about that I'm excited about, because it's important to look at who were the top offenses, who could be the top offenses, who we can get value on to be the top offenses, and that's a huge edge. But there's other things kind of post schedule release that I think are important things to talk about. And it's bye weeks, and then the playoff schedule as a whole, because you can talk about week 17 all you want, but if you don't make it to the playoffs through weeks 15 and 16, it doesn't matter how much week 17 correlation you have. So that's something that you wrote about, both bye weeks and kind of the whole playoff picture, just a very early look. So let's talk about both here, and let's start with the bye weeks. So, Steve, when you now have access to the bye weeks and are going through and building out a best ball draft, just tell me kind of how you prioritize bye weeks and how that matters.
So I think it's broken down into two key areas. The first is positionally, and then the other is draft capital. Starting with positionally, the biggest thing is, of course, making sure that you're covered for every position. We do not want zeros in best ball fantasy. That's why we have 18 rounds in underdog, 20 in DK, and drafters. And is absolutely crucial, particularly in the playoff formats, to not be taking zeros in those first 14 weeks, because those first 14 weeks, yes, two teams are advancing to the playoffs, but boy, if you take a zero, you could quickly be in third or fourth where you would have been second. So obviously that's most important at positions like quarterback and tight end. We really want to lay our buys. We don't even, if we're even taking three at a position, we typically don't want three or like two at one bye week and then one other one. We just want to give ourselves as many options as possible. But this is also true, particularly when it comes to builds like a running back build where you might only take 4 running backs, or a receiver build where you want 0 running backs, so you're taking 7 and you're maybe only taking 6 or 7 receivers. Well, then you can't have 3 or 4 bye weeks to your receivers also. So it's lesser important for running back and receiver, but it's still something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the key takeaway is, just pay attention to your bye weeks, because again, if you're only taking 2 quarterbacks and they have the same bye week, you're obviously getting to 0. Same thing for tight end. And I'm not saying if there's just if you decide to take 3 quarterbacks and 2 of them have the same bye week, that's an absolute no. But if you decide to do 3, especially if they are not the top echelon quarterbacks, then like you said, you want to give yourself as many out. So again, if the perfect combination fits where 2 out of the 3 quarterbacks have the same bye week, okay. But it's just something to really, really, really pay attention to, and definitely really pay attention to who your starting lineup would be, because that if your first 2 running backs you take have the same bye week, then you better be really happy with your your third or even fourth, right?
Yeah, and that's the other part, the amount of draft capital we're putting in it, both, again, positionally and as a whole. Positionally, particularly when we're looking at running backs and receivers, a lot of times, if you want to take 2 running backs, and whether you're taking them, a hero build where the first one's in the first couple rounds and the next one's in rounds, 6 through 8, that's still the same principle. You're still, if your top 2 guys are out, or 3 of your top 4 receivers, or even 3 of your top 5, it's going to get thinner. And sure, are there cases where maybe you're getting a quarterback with his top 2 receivers? Of course, those 2 guys are going to have the same bye.
Of course.
But then you want to make sure you're covered for that week, because remember, and this is where the total draft capital comes into play, because remember that week you're now down your quarterback, you're down the top 2 receivers, and anyone else who might share that bye week. And for some of these bye weeks that maybe only have 2 games, it's very easy to avoid. But take for instance week 7. You have teams like the Bengals, Cowboys, Jets, all high value fantasy teams that we're looking at right now. And then you've got teams like the Panthers, Texans, even the Titans. A lot of value plays on like the Panthers and Texans with their rookie quarterbacks and hoping that some of their like mid receivers and tight ends might pop. Even though, running backs both look really good. So, if you, are stacking up, excuse me, the Bengals and you get that Jamar Chase, and whether it's T. Higgins or it's Tyler Boyd later, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, and one of those other 2 receivers, well, if you're taking, Brandon Cooks from the Cowboys and Alan Lazard from the Jets, you've just really eaten into your entire receiver.
Yeah.
And then, especially if you're starting to take running backs from, say, the Texans or the Panthers, Dameon Pierce is part of that type of build. He seems like a great play, but now we've weakened our running back position, which wasn't even probably strong to begin with since we started at wide receiver. So, it's just that kind of thing. We do have to remember we will always want to have the highest floor and ceiling potential as possible. And when we just overstack 1 or 2 of these bye weeks, those weeks we could really have, even if we end up with enough players to actually fill out a roster, we could have a really bad score. And I mean, I know I had multiple times where my 3rd place team was within 10, 12 points of making the playoffs. I mean, that's just one player going from a 5-point game to a 17-point game, or 2 players going from 5 to 10, that type of thing. So that happens a lot more than you think. And sure, sometimes we can point to injuries, but other times it's simply, we just didn't have enough. We just need one more good week from a player. And then especially in these playoff formats, because you just don't know who gets hot. Like I know somebody that you were very high on, Jerick McKinnon. He was the playoff running back darling, but he was not good weeks 1 through 14. So you had to be covered if you were going to make it to the playoffs, kind of that weeks 1 through 14.
Yeah, they say it sometimes just in sports, like just get me to the dance, get me to, and then let's see what a team does, and kind of anything can happen in playoffs. I mean, that really is what it is in best ball, because then it's like 1 week, almost like DFS tournaments each week. Week 15, okay, top 1 or 2 move on. Week 16, top 1 or 2 move on. And then you're in this, pod to win big money. And it's again, you're not even going to make playoffs if you're not careful with all these other different strategies. And so sometimes people hyper focus on too many other things. Make sure your bye weeks are covered, because just like you said, you looked and you were in 3rd. I had multiple teams, same thing. And last year was the first year that we really had a high number of entries and can look at advance rate. And we both had a good advance rate, but it's tough to see that we had some good teams that what could they have done? What could they have done in playoffs had they, maybe I'd just been a little more careful with my bye weeks and that team squeaked in.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, there's plenty of people who can say it, but I had multiple Brady Evans stacks that finished 3rd. And, that were probably within 10 to 15 points from getting to 2nd place. And who knows if I would have,
made the finals,
gotten through 15 and 16, but
you want to have the shot.
I would have loved to have had that shot. Yeah.
You would have loved to have that shot. Exactly. And that, I think those are good ways to frame it and understand, to get McKinnon through to then be a hero, to get Brady and Evans through to then be a hero. They may not be a hero all the way or even for good chunks of the way, but you need to get them there to then do their damage in weeks 15, 16, 17, and give your teams a shot. So it's all about just giving as many teams a shot in the playoffs, and bye weeks and watching bye weeks is one of the things to do. Okay. And again, Steve has an article up on fanspeak.com right now. Be sure to check that out. We have articles, honestly, each and every week. We're going to have, 4+ articles a week on best ball strategy and best ball content. So be sure to check out fanspeak.com. Also, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because we're going to be having, again, best ball shows, strategy shows, live drafts each and every week. So we would really appreciate that. Okay, now let's move over to the other topic that we want to talk that's just kind of related to the schedule release, and that is the best ball playoffs. Again, people talk about week 17, week 17, week 17. Again, we look at it too, but does not matter. Again, your Brady and Evans stack from last year, if it doesn't get there. And so many people are focused on week 17, but if you are not making a build that gets you to week 17, that gets you to playoffs, and then is built to get through the playoffs, that is very problematic. So speak to that, and then we'll take a look at another article you wrote about the paths for each team in their fantasy playoff run.
Yeah, and I do think it matters, and well, week 17 gets overhyped, and I think the whole playoff structure gets underhyped because they're all parts of the pie, and not only from a perspective, we need to look at it just as we talked about before with making sure our bye weeks and other things that we can do, like we talked about last week about ensuring that we are having the highest upside. Getting through to the playoffs is one thing, but advancing every week is important. Like I said before, like, we don't know if that Brady Evans team would have gotten there, but I want to see. So I want to be in the playoffs. And then I want to look at what I can do each week, weeks 15 and 16 to see if my build can get through, because we see it every year where some top offense, a couple of them, just run into a buzzsaw of a defense, just have a bad game due to weather or
just a lower scoring game.
And sometimes obviously injuries can be a factor. Injuries are the one thing we can't predict. But what we can predict are the environment, whether it's in a dome, good weather, and that can be debatable, of course, but it can be a plus or a minus, I feel like. And then the potential schedule. And while a lot can change, defenses that we thought were going to be great last year maybe didn't end up being great, but and vice versa. But, this is the best data we have right now, and it should be a factor. I don't think
because it's not like we can change it in week 4. It isn't DFS. Yeah. You're locked in. When you make that draft, you're locked in. So you need to make the assumptions, May all the way through Labor Day or all the way through the start of the NFL season as to, these are the teams that, I think are good defensive matchups for my potential playoff teams and good potential playoff matchups. And weather is a factor, again, it gets overblown sometimes, but then sometimes it is more of a factor. The Bills put up how many points in week 15, and you did not see, there were a lot of Josh Allen stacks that did not make it through because he got okay points for Josh Allen, but it was didn't Singletary have 2 touchdowns on the ground that week?
Yeah, they ran a lot, including Allen running for 1.
So Allen ran,
and then did not have good games.
Yeah, Diggs, Davis were absolutely neutered. I think Singletary ran for 2. Allen was just average. He was fine. He had a good floor, but he wasn't. That week a bunch of quarterbacks went off. So when your quarterback that you spent last year a 3rd round pick on, one of the top quarterbacks just has a average week, and all these other quarterbacks are smashing. That's a problem. And honestly, they were playing in Chicago, and it wasn't snowing, or I don't think insane winds, but it was like below whatever temperatures that are not easy to play football and not easy to get a good passing game going in. So it's just stuff to consider. We don't know the weather, week 15 in Buffalo or Chicago or whatever some of these games are, but it's just something to keep in mind. That doesn't mean, oh God, this team's playing in Buffalo, I have to avoid them, or I have to avoid Buffalo. No, it just keep everything. It's all part of putting the whole picture in perspective. And if you're new to best ball and you're wondering what the hell are they talking about week 15, week 16, week 17, the regular season's weeks 1 through 14. Week 15 is quarterfinals. You depending on the type of tournament you're in the tournament style formats, anywhere from 1 to 3 teams move on to the semifinals week 16. Then it gets even shorter. Usually just 1 team moves on in that pod to the finals in week 17. So that's why we're talking about how it's not just week 17, it's week 15, 16, and 17, the picture of the playoffs that are so important to give yourself a chance to get to week 17. Any other thoughts on that? And then I want to pull over your article, and we're going to kind of just go through to, this is obviously a May early look at the, whole playoff picture and, the top, your favorite team in each division that you think has a good playoff path. So let me bring that over now. Of course, this is over on fanspeak.com. So Steve wrote this article about, again, each team division by division and their playoff path, as you can see, has 3 teams listed for each going in the order 15, 16, 17. So let's quickly take a look at the NFC East first, Steve. And who is your favorite kind of team? We can't see the commander or go to Commanders, but who is your favorite team and their kind of playoff picture?
So I think it's very close here between the Eagles and the Cowboys. Cowboys are going to have all dome game, or a dome game final, and then Dolphins in week 16, which is nice. But the Bills is outside, and of course you do worry about the Bills defense at least. But those are 3 potential high scoring games. What I do like about the Eagles, you have Seahawks and then Giants and Cardinals at home, and Seahawks and Cardinals are probably pretty easy defenses. Giants are a little improved, but I mean, Eagles just wiped the floor with them, both times, 2 of the 3 times, once in the playoffs when their starters were actually playing. So, yeah, those are the ones I'd give a slight lean to the Eagles, just with that game.
Yeah.
The only concern with the Eagles would be that Cardinals, if the Eagles already have the division wrapped up, they could be pulling starters at halftime.
Yeah, and that's obviously then week 17. I will say I'm very bullish on the Cowboys this year as a Washington fan, and that's icky, but it's true. We talked about in the Top Offenses show, in the Top Offenses article I'm writing, you just see every metric of Dallas is a top offense, and I think they will be this year, and they're undervalued. And so I'm very bullish on the Cowboys. And then you look at their playoff path, and it's like, boy, if they can get through the Bill, they can put up high scores, whoever you stack. Whether it's Dak, Pollard, the receivers, they're one of their, young tight ends. However you stack up the Cowboys, if they can get through the Bills and put up solid scores to get you into the semifinals and then finals, boy, do they have some nice matchups of both weather/dome, and then, matchups where I think they're going to have to go back and forth in a potential shootout, right?
Yeah, that definitely.
I mean, an early look, I love that. So, okay, let's move over to the NFC North. Of course, Bears, Lions, Packers, Vikings. Break down whose playoff path you like the best. Again, early look. We'll spend much more time on this later and throughout the summer.
Yeah. So, these teams do have easy schedules. Bears and Packers have multiple easy games in that window. But I'm going to go with the Lions here. Broncos are definitely a scary defense. Overall, though, really good offenses were able to put up some points on them last year. And of course, the Broncos offense could be better. What I like about the Lions is every game's going to be in a dome, at home versus the Broncos, and then at Minnesota, at Dallas.
That's a great
one. And then Vikings, Dallas. I mean, talk about 2 big time shootout games. Dallas has some star defensive players, but we've seen them give up points for sure.
Yeah, I definitely like those games of points. And I've already, again, like the Lions last year, like them this year. I mean, a lot of people do, but this is a reason to like them even further. NFC South. The NFC South has one of the easiest strength of schedule, easiest schedules as from a real life perspective. But this is their schedule, for the best ball playoffs. So tell me who you like for the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some easy schedules here, but I kind of like the Saints. I think they are the team with the most experienced quarterback, obviously, in Derek Carr, and some key pieces, most notably Chris Olave, and at home against the Giants, and then Rams and Bucks. I mean, those are 2 defenses that lost a lot of pieces this offseason, and at Rams is, of course, in a dome as well, and Buccaneers, Tampa. Right. In December, January, that's exactly where you want to be. So
and Bucks, Saints, I believe, have one of the easiest, if not the easiest, strength of schedule throughout the season. And boy, I'm really starting to come around with the Saints from a best ball perspective as far as team stacking, because outside of Olave, you can get insane value on their players.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, let's round out the NFC and talk about the NFC West. I'm just not very interested in the Cardinals, but of course, Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, Seahawks. Where are you going here for kind of best playoff matchups?
Yeah, so with them playing some, the Rams and 49ers both play the Commanders, who last year had one of the stingiest defenses in terms of points allowed. So that's all obviously scary. And Seahawks were elite, and that's who Seattle plays. I am going to go with Seattle because they do get Seattle gets Philly. I'm sorry, Philly at home, but then they're at Titans, and I think Tennessee's a team whose defense could be really hurting. They lost a lot of linebackers and edge help, weren't able to replace a lot of that. And then Pittsburgh could be a good defense, but I also think the Pittsburgh offense could be a bit more high scoring. Could see that a little shootout. And Seattle at home, this could be a key game for Seattle, either fighting for a playoff spot or maybe even fighting for the division with the 49ers. So I would expect them, and the Steelers could be in the playoff hunt also. So that could be a good back and forth game.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move over to the AFC. Of course, as we're passing this, I should, of course, bring up whether you're on Underdog or Drafters Fantasy. Use code FANSPEAK if you have not joined yet. Using code FANSPEAK gets you 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So you deposit $100, get $200. That gets you plenty of best ball drafts, no matter, because there's all different price point options on both. Okay, let's see. Good. So AFC East, Steve, talk to me about, this is a tough division. I mean, this division has to run the gauntlet because they play each other. And oh, by the way, they play the AFC West and the NFC East. So very tough, again, real life schedule for these teams. One thing I'll say about that is I feel like in most cases there could be then some potential shootouts. What do you see for the playoff path for them?
Yeah, I think Buffalo has a strong schedule, though 2 games will be at home. So there's a slight concern there.
Yeah.
And they have a road game in between, which is out all the way out west. So that's just not the greatest.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick though the Dolphins here. 2 home games, Jets and Cowboys, and then at Ravens to end it up. We saw the Dolphins absolutely shred the Ravens defense a year ago, one of the highest scoring games.
Oh, that game was so fun to watch. Yeah.
All the fantasy goodness you would ever want.
Exactly.
And Cowboys, again, high scoring team. Jets, we believe with Aaron Rodgers are going to be much more high scoring. Obviously the Jets have a tough defense as projected, but I just think that when it gets to this type of situation, this could quickly just turn into a shootout.
Right. And like you said, for the Dolphins, 2 games in Miami, that doesn't hurt either in late December, January. Okay, AFC North, Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Steelers. Who are you leaning towards as your kind of favorite playoff path?
Yeah, I think I think a couple teams are fairly favorable, but I'm going with the Bengals. You have Vikings, and then at Steelers, at Chiefs. Vikings defense was just horrendous a year ago. They made some improvements, but they also just traded away Zadarius Smith. So I think Bengals can put up a lot of points there. I talked about the Steelers earlier, potentially good defense, but again, I think Cincinnati can put up points. And as we know, Cincy Chiefs, I mean, they've met in the playoffs multiple years. They've met in the regular season multiple times. 2 years ago was Week 17. Jamar Chase won people a lot of money that week in fantasy and best ball.
Yep.
So, we could see a lot of fireworks, and there could be a lot riding on that game in terms of seeding. I think the one concern would be if say the Chiefs had the number 1 seed locked up, or the Bengals have no chance at advancing their seeding. Maybe you get some sitting type situations, but other than that, I really like the upside of that game.
Okay. All right. AFC South, obviously, we like the Jacksonville Jaguars the best in the division, but we have the Texans, Colts, Jaguars, Titans. Do you like the Jaguars path, or which path in the playoffs do you lean towards?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some easy schedules here. I will point to the Jaguars. I think the Ravens secondary has a lot of holes. Their pass rush can be fine, but I think their secondary has a lot of holes. Buccaneers, as talked about before, they're missing a lot of pieces. And then, of course, Carolina has a good young defense, but I just think Jacksonville, again, Week 17, if the Jaguars have a lot to play for, likely seeding. But last year we saw they actually did sit their starters second half in their final in Week 17 because they'd locked up their spot and couldn't kind of move their seed any. But hopefully they're more competitive and might be in the mix for, if not a bye, at least improving their path. Yeah. But so I just think these are 3 games that they can put up some points against. And of course the weather
Yeah,
two
all
home games,
Florida. You said all Florida
then
games, right? Am I
and
reading
then
that?
at Buccaneers. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't beat
Yeah.
that.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, finally, the again gauntlet division here of the AFC West: Broncos, Raiders, Chargers, Chiefs. Again, tough schedule, real life, because they're playing each other, and the AFC East. But who do you like for the playoff path?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few teams that have kind of good situations, but Chiefs are my favorite here. Patriots definitely don't scare me. We've seen that the Patriots' defensive numbers, I believe, as Connor Allen talked about, had some tweets about Patriots' defense was great against bad offenses and terrible against good offenses. Well, guess what Kansas City is? Add in the Raiders, they have pass rushers, but their secondary is extremely weak. And then the Bengals, again, we've seen a lot of fireworks from these two teams. Could be a lot riding on that game. So if so, I'm on board for that. It is the Week 17 correlation that everyone wants, but I just want these teams because I think they both have two really strong playoff paths as well.
Yeah, well, they're good teams, and then they have, by the way,
they check every box. There's no
They check
doubt.
every box. I will say a little honorable mention to the Broncos here, in my opinion. I'm bullish on the Broncos have a bounce back season under Sean Payton. And then, again, you have a playoff path of the Lions in the Dome, Patriots, and Chargers, so I kind of like that too.
Yeah.
Potential for points and good environments and stuff. So, no, this has been good. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Again, just wrapping up, making sure you're paying attention to more than Week 17. You're paying attention to the whole playoff picture. You're paying attention to bye weeks. Paying attention to, like we talked about the last episode, stacking up top offenses. Any final thoughts?
So just one thing is I encourage everyone to look at the playoff paths on their own and figure things out. Do consider how these teams, particularly the defenses, have changed. You look at a team like the Falcons, one of the worst defenses in the league last year. They spent a lot of money in free agency, added some more in the mid rounds of the draft. And they already had a couple key guys like Grady Jarrett, like Terrell in the back end. So, that defense could be a top 15 defense for sure. So, just don't assume that what happened last year will be this year.
Yeah, it's important. I think it's important to look at offensive additions for fantasy. It's also important to look at defensive additions and changes for fantasy. So, again, if you are new to Underdog or Drafters, be sure to use that code FANSPEAK. Get yourself a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. Hit that like button on the way out. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.